Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin, and on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the 109 nonprofit empowerment webinar series. And this one's on a subject I think everybody, no matter how big your nonprofit is, what sector in, you want to do a better job. It's winning grants. And I think we got one of the best people on the planet, Alex Dunn, Millionaire Grant Lady, who's going to get a little bigger introduction in a moment to talk and tell you what to do and what not to do. First of all, I'd like to introduce my producer since podcast number 1, John Argent, who's CEO of Game Day Media. We encourage your participation. John's job is to fact check me. And John, for our audience to participate, there are 3 ways. Do I have 2, 3, 4 fingers up? No, three ways. You can type in the chat space and we'll see that. And hopefully Alex and I, this is your show. I have like a half a zillion questions for Alex, but we're going to respond to the audience. So you can type into the chat space. You can type a question into the Q&A box. Best of all, you can raise your hand, and thank you. We're going to have you on in a moment. You can raise your hand, and we'll give you video and audio privileges and show off your pretty face. So first of all, I want to take care of a little housekeeping. In our audience, Alex is a learning community composed of professional and volunteer nonprofit leaders. We have CEOs, executive directors, directors of development, board chairs, board members, volunteers, donors, friends of nonprofits. So we like to think that we can learn and grow together. John, I'll tell you what, can we put up the first slide on nominate your nonprofit North Star? But this is the information. It's not really overwhelming. John, if you could scroll down, we just need to identify your contact information, your nominee's contact information. And then there are really 2 questions that take a little more thought. John, as you see, describe how your nominee is making a difference in the community. If possible, share measurable impacts. And then in a few sentences, describe why you believe your nominee's example is inspirational. And what we're doing, we're reviewing that. We are selecting folks, and we plan to run about 1 or 2 podcasts a month. And it's going to depend on the nominations you make. So please, if you have colleagues, neighbors, friends, nominate them. And we love to salute them in our podcast series. Next, if you could give audio and video privileges to Ann Krause. Let's bring her on, and then put on the slide for Hemisphere Conservancy. Why don't you take a second, just tell people about Hemisphere Conservancy, and you can talk about, first of all, tell us about Hemisphere Conservancy.
You bet. And you know what? The join the team page is better looking than I am anyway. So probably worked out for the best. Super excited to be with you always, Jim. You always do such a wonderful job on these webinars. And I really appreciate your inviting me to share about 2 openings we have. So
okay, you got 2 openings, right?
Yes, sir. In a nutshell, we are redeveloping the site of the 1968 World's Fair and converting it into a 40-acre urban parks district where people work, live, and play. So the easiest way to paint a picture in your mind is we are creating the Central Park of San Antonio. So we've had tremendous success. Our first park opened in 2015. We've already had 4.4 million visitors. Last month, we opened the first phase of our flagship park. We've got a couple more acres to complete that one before the NCAA Final Four in 2025. And then the third park will be at the base of the iconic tower that was built for the World's Fair. So that's enough about mission, because I know we've got other things to talk about today. But I have 2 great roles. One is our annual giving and grants manager position. I purposely did not title this grant writer because there's so much more than to just writing grants. My whole team, we're relationship-based fundraisers. And so we want our person to be out in the community, meeting people, having conversations with donors, having conversations with foundations reps, so that none of our asks are cold. And we have done our homework in finding that perfect match between philanthropic intent and our mission. So that one, as soon as we find the right candidate, we'll bring them on board. And then lastly, our development and communication manager position has been held by the same person for 9 years. I am devastated that she is moving to Washington, D.C. to be closer to family, but she has established this position. She manages our Razor's Edge database and does a lot of social media posts and helps with donor relations and has a small portfolio of donors also. I'm in this for the long haul. I want people who want to stay for more than 18 months. I want to destroy that 18-month average for development professionals in San Antonio by establishing an amazing work culture with a transformational project that'll make you excited to come to work every day.
By the way, Alex, I always like to brag on Ann because I don't know how many people you can brag on. Part of her background is leading the Thunderbird squad. So she's quite a pilot.
That's awesome.
I was only
love
the
it.
executive officer. I helped run the squadron, but I was not the boss, but it was a great experience. Jim, you always over promote, and that's so embarrassing, but it's also very kind. Well, if anybody has questions about those two positions, you can find them on hemisphere.org. And I'm also really easy to find on LinkedIn and whatnot. If anybody has any questions, I'm so proud of the people. We have the right people on the bus right now. We just want to fill up the bus with some more good people. So thanks so much, Jim. And I look forward to hearing from you, Alex.
Okay, Ann, and be well, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, let's get to our guest of honor, Alex Dunn. I have to say, Alex, I'm a little angry at you. I am so jealous of how much you've accomplished at a very young age. And she launched Millionaire Grant Lady. I believe it was 2019. She has raised over $100 million for nonprofits of all sizes and types. And I tell her it's not going to be long. When she gets to be my age, she's going to be the Billionaire Grant Lady. And she's coming to us from Arlington, Texas, where you have a pretty good base cell team. Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. And of course, the Texas Rangers are going to the World Series, so I'm pretty dang excited.
Okay. Hey, let's take the temperature of the audience. I said that you can type in the chat space, and I got a couple of questions, and these are the first two are just yes or no. First one, type in yes or no. Has your nonprofit received a $1 million grant? Type in yes or no. Let's give them a second. Don't worry, by the end of this show, your no's are going to get to the, you're going to know how to get to the yes. Okay, our second question, I want you to type in yes or no. Has your organization applied for a $1 million grant in calendar year 2023, which is quickly winding up? Have you applied for a $1 million grant this year? We'll give you a moment. Okay, and the last one, you're going to have to put a few words in. We have Alex for about 54 more minutes. What do you want to learn most over the next hour? Just type in a few words. And again, anytime during the Q&A discussion between Alex and myself that you want to chime in, you can use the chat box, the Q&A. You can raise your hand, and John will give you audio and video privileges, and you can take the floor because this show is for you. Okay. Okay, Alex, are you ready for our Q&A?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's start with a real tough one. There are a lot of grant writing consultants out there. What makes the Millionaire Grant Lady different?
Oh, well, I am a results-oriented person. I've always been a results-oriented person. And so one of the things that makes us different is that we've raised over $100 million in funding. Um, that's relatively rare, especially for
Over what period of time is that 100 million raised? Over how many years?
14 years.
Okay.
Yep. You made me do math. After 100 million, I quit doing math. I can't count anymore. But anyway, so yes, so that's one thing that makes us different. Another thing that makes us different is that we really work on positioning organizations for success and thinking about what is it that are your unique selling points. And one example of positioning an organization for success would be like, you'll rarely see me recommend that somebody should write a grant for a new staff position. But instead, we might write a grant for your successful program that meets this specific need that's the most important need in the community and is aligned with the foundation's goals and is going to have this impact. And oh, by the way, in the budget, there's new staff positions. So
I think in the business we call that a workaround.
Yes, exactly. We also focus a lot on metrics in the grant applications. It's really important in both government and private applications. We want metrics that convey impact, that are specific, but that are also really easy for the nonprofit to report on in the future so that they're not pulling their hair out after they get the grant award and able to do reports easily. We do a lot of matchmaking between the funder and the client, both in government
That's not
grants.
dating, right?
No, I strongly discourage dating your funder. That's
Okay.
a no-no. But, we do look at making sure that there's a good match between the funder and the client, whether it's government or private funding. And then the most important thing, I think, is that funders are people too. They're good people. They care about the same social issues that we care about. They have dedicated their time as a volunteer or their time professionally to making an impact, just like we in the nonprofit sector have. So we really try to convey warmth and gratitude in our applications. And I like to say that a good application needs to be something that can be read with a glass of wine instead of a cup of coffee. So you
red
don't
or
want
white, red or white.
It depends. I'll let them decide red or white, but definitely not coffee. Not
Yeah.
coffee, not cappuccino,
Yeah.
not a double shot espresso. We want to make sure that it's easy for people to read and understand.
Another thing that makes you different in a good way, you started your career as a social worker. Can you comment, in addition to helping you be more effective securing mental health grants, how being a social worker has strengthened your capacity to help clients throughout the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, so I got into this work because I wanted to make a difference. And I mean, like a lot of nonprofit professionals do, I suppose. But I knew from the time that I was in school as a social work major that it took money to make a mission work. And so I wanted to be a part of making the money for the mission. I think that it helps me to learn fast about an issue and to think about the program and communicate about the program all the way through. So there are these 3 needs that are in the community. This program addresses those 3 needs, and these metrics help us make sure that the program is actually effective, and to make sure that it all fits together and that it's actually going to solve the social problem, which I think is what most of the funders care about.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so it just helps me. I understand a lot of the evidence-based practices. I understand a lot of the social issues, and it helps me be a little bit more quick to understand a social issue than somebody that's maybe coming from like marketing or something along those lines.
Yeah. Let's get a little to the nuts and bolts, if that's okay. How should a nonprofit research which foundations or funders might be a good fit for them?
Yeah, so that's a really important thing because, like I said, you really want to not date but matchmake appropriately between the funder and the nonprofit. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time. There are some people who, and some nonprofits or grant writers who are looking to do 100 different grant applications, and it's like, well, you're not a good fit for 100 different applications. You're really a good fit for a smaller number of very close-fitting funders usually. So first, I say that you look at the mission and the funder's mission.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to look
And that,
past
by
their
the
mission.
way, that's probably typically on their website.
It's on their website. It's in their 990. So you have to look at what they say their mission is, but then you also have to look past their mission, because if I had a nickel for every time a funder said that they really supported the social services and health for needy children, and then you look at their 990 and they gave 75% of their money to the arts, you're like, well, you know, if I just looked at your mission, I would think that we were a great fit, but I look at where you've actually given your money. Actions speak louder than words, right? And, you know, you've been heavily invested in the arts.
By the way, so folks know, one of the easiest ways to find a 990 is just to go to GuideStar. What do you recommend?
Yes, I use a paid database because it's my job to find funders all the time. But you can absolutely, if you know the funder's name especially, you can go to GuideStar and set up a free account and look at a 990. Absolutely. And the 990, for those who don't know, I'm sorry, I'm using jargon already. The 990 is the IRS document that foundations have to file, just like nonprofits have to file. But in the foundation 990, they have to list out where they've given their money.
Mm-hmm. As a former executive director of a community college foundation, the 990, when I had an external auditor, wasn't that painful compared to the official audit.
The audit, right.
Okay, you help people get both private and government grants. Can you tell us what's similar and what's different about applying for private and government grants?
Yeah, I'd like to start with what's similar, because I think it's surprising the amount of things that are actually similar between government and private grants. So the most important thing that's similar is that most of the time you have tired people that are reading the grant applications. People that are easily distracted. It could be people that are volunteers in reviewing applications.
They might be drinking some of that wine instead of the coffee you mentioned.
Yes, you don't want them drinking too much wine. There's a fine line with the amount of wine that they're drinking. But so they might be volunteers that are doing it after hours. They might be people who are paid to review applications, but it's not their full-time job, so they're still doing it after hours. Even if they work full-time at a foundation and they're reviewing applications, it's usually on top of other work that they do. So just like the rest of us human beings, the most important thing is it is human beings reading these applications. No matter where you're applying, they are easily distracted. They are generally tired. I feel like fatigue in the last few years is through the roof for everybody. And that they're also good people who have goals that they want to accomplish with money. And you have to tie what your organization is proposing to the goals that they want to accomplish. And you have to make it easy enough for them to read that if they're tired or distracted, they're going to make it all the way through and understand what you said. So
How
So
about plain English instead of jargon?
yes, exactly. Plain English instead of jargon. It doesn't need to read like a statistics textbook. You need to say what sets your organization apart, and you need to say how you can meet the funder's goals. The interesting thing is that when it comes to the differences, foundations, you have to prove that the social issue that you're talking about deserves a piece of the pie, because most foundations, they give across several different sectors. So it's very rare that a foundation gives 100% of their money to just arts or 100% of their money to just health. Most of the times they've got this pot of money that they're dividing between arts and health and social services and education and community benefit. And even within health, they might be dividing that money between older adults, kids, chronic diseases, cancer, so you have to argue for your cause to have a piece of the pie. And you have to start from zero in your explanations. What I mean by that is they might have no understanding about your social issue at all, because they are generalists that have to understand everything and not experts. The government, on the other hand, they know why the issue is important because they've put out an RFP specifically for that issue. And so you don't have to start from zero explaining why the issue is important or explaining certain context around the issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and one way that they're easier. Typically I fear government grants more than private, but that's me. That sounds like, that's a few points of applying for government grants. That's one less headache to deal with.
Yeah, government grants are generally longer and harder. They're more competitive. They have stricter requirements on the back end, but they're bigger awards. So it's kind of, the work, if you get it, is a bigger impact than private money sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, no easy questions. How can a nonprofit determine if its project genuinely is distinctive and stands out from all the other good causes?
Oh man, you told me only easy questions, Jim.
Yeah. No, here's the way easy questions I get, difficult questions you get.
Oh, okay, I got you. Now we understand each other. So, sometimes you have to be honest with yourself, I think, and look at who are the other similar organizations, especially in your area, and ask yourself who else does this and do they do it better than you? And I think you have to be a little bit honest in that assessment of your answer. If they do it better than you, then you need to think of how you can do it better. You could also ask honest people. Everybody's got those people in their lives that are honest, maybe a little blunt. Sometimes there's a funder in an area that's generally known that they like to give advice. Up in Fort Worth, Eamon Carter is a foundation that's kind of known that they like to give advice. So you could ask, potentially a funder if you've got a good enough relationship with them. But I think that the reason why I love grants as a social worker is because it should be about how a nonprofit makes the biggest and the best social impact. And so there's a degree of honesty in the nonprofit sector that I think is needed for us to be cognizant of if we're adding value to our communities and how we're adding value and how we can add more value to our communities as well. And I have been known to tell people that I think that their idea is something that's at least not fundable from a foundation perspective. So I
Do
think
you look
seek
them
out
straight in the
honest
eyes
people.
when you tell them that?
I
That's gonna be a
kind of
fun-
do this
That's going to
sometimes.
be a fun conversation.
Yeah, just because it's not fundable to a foundation doesn't mean that it's not something that can happen. It's just my opinion. I'm not God or anything.
Yeah.
So,
Not
but
yet, not yet. We're going to wait till you're the billionaire grant lady.
even then I'm not God. Thank
Hey,
God I'm not
hey.
God, right?
Hey, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of foundations, a lot of the big ones become a lot more flexible, a lot more open to unrestricted, to general operating funds. And do you see that trend continuing after the pandemic?
Yeah, this was something that the nonprofit community had really called out for, that they wanted this more flexible funding and more general operating funding. And foundations that did this during the pandemic, I am seeing that a lot of them are continuing to do it. In fact, I can think of a few foundations recently that we applied to, and we applied for a program and they came back and said, we would rather do this as a general operating. Would you take it? And the client's like, yes, of course I'll take it as a general operating. So I think that in the foundations that are predisposed to that idea and that way of thinking, that it's going to continue. I think it remains to be seen if foundations who didn't do that during the pandemic will start doing it and will kind of like jump on the train, I personally think it's key to show how your organization makes an impact, even if what you're asking for is general operating. And then another, I think you called it a workaround earlier. Did you call it a workaround?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So one workaround is that if a foundation won't do general operating funding, then a lot of times I have clients set up their ask and their budget where they are including a lot of their operating costs for that program into that budget. Of course, in a way that would be approved by your auditors and all that happy stuff. But it can absolutely be done.
You're doing a great time of managing time. And I want to be sure to get to your innovations, and we're going to bring in our audience in a moment. But before we do that, how much of a commitment does a nonprofit need to make to a project, either through direct or indirect resources?
That's a tricky question. I don't think that there is a hard and fast rule. I think that a commitment is always good. And that if it's
will funders let you know? Will funders let you know they want 25% or whatever?
Some funders will, especially the government, will say that they need this amount of money as leverage or match funding. And some funders will also let you know that they only fund 20% of a budget. So I think that if you've got commitment in your budget, that it should be clearly itemized in your budget. It should be described in the narrative as a selling point. Leverage, like I said, is very important in government grant applications. And sometimes I have clients that have a hard time figuring out how to put this, how to find a way that they can say that they have a commitment. And again, I say, when you're putting together your budget for your grant applications, think about all the costs of the program so that you can show your organization's contribution to the project when you include actually all the costs that it takes to run the program.
What do you say we hear from some of our learning community? Do we have
Hey, Jim?
Randa Luna available? John, can you bring her on screen and give her audio privileges?
I sure can. We also have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I wanted to get Randa, and also, do you have Gerald Hill? I wanted to make sure, but let's start with Randa, and then we'll go to the questions, okay? And then I still have about a half a zillion questions for Alex myself. So we're going to move with vigor. But Randa, are you there?
I am. Hi.
Let's see.
Hi, Randa.
Does she have video privileges?
He does. Let me see if I can pull her up here.
And while you're working on that, is Gerald Hill queued up? He will be after Randa, and then we'll go to some of the open questions. And then I got to get at least 3 in about Alex's innovations and contributions to her craft.
I have lost Randa on the roster here. So I
Really,
do not
Randa, you're not there? How about Gerald Hill?
I'm still here.
She's still there. I just can't pull up her
Okay, we
camera.
can't see you, Randa, but we know what you look like.
You got a great picture, Randa.
Randa, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay, Alex, can you hear Randa?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if my notes are correct, Randa is in Austin, Texas, and we need to congratulate her. She's the newest regional coach of the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence. Before you share your question, congratulations, Randa.
Congratulations.
Could you give us a very quick definition of your new employer?
Sure. So the Institute's a national network of resource development experts. So we empower nonprofits to promote their missions and secure more gifts of time and talent and treasure more effectively.
Okay, and do you have a really tough question for Alex?
I hope it's not tough, but I think
Me
No, I
too.
do. If it's easy, I'm going to grab it.
Randa,
If it's
nobody
tough,
hopes that
Alex
more
is
than
gonna
me.
take it.
you've been so amazing to listen to. I've loved this conversation. I knew it was going to be good. So I wanted to ask, how has collaboration and networking contributed to your success in securing your grants? And do you have advice for people like me and other nonprofit professionals on building effective partnerships?
Yeah, do you mean partnerships with funders or partnerships with other nonprofits?
Both.
Ah, good. A
Why
broad
don't
one.
we focus on partnerships with nonprofits? How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So, the area of Texas that I am in is really fortunate to have several different sectors that have coalitions and collaborations that work closely together. There's one in mental health, there's one in homelessness. I'm probably missing some, but those are the 2 that come to mind the easiest. And actually, that's not true. There's several around health that I'm aware of, around health disparities, some around a geographic area. So I think that finding the best partners is really important for a nonprofit to maximize your mission, to not duplicate services, to learn from each other's experiences, and to reduce a lot of wasted time and effort around things that other people have learned from. And I also think it's really great in grant applications because everyone loves to see that you're not working alone, that you know what's going on around you, and that you have good partnerships in order to meet the goal. I think that there's been a lot of emphasis in grants around the idea that you don't want to duplicate services, or funders don't want services to be duplicated. And also that they want to know that even if your organization can't provide everything to everyone, that you have partners who can kind of help fill those gaps. And also from a social services perspective, that's just really important that you have partnerships that can help fill the gaps for clients.
Right. Thank you, Randa. Thank you, Alex. By the way, John, and then I know we got a few questions in the chat space, but is Gerald Hill available to come on camera or audio? Gerald, and you serve on boards, don't you?
Served on boards, and the last about 10 years, I've just been doing volunteer work with Communicare, the healthcare groups, and then school board with TMI Episcopal.
Thank you for your service. And that entitles you to ask a question of Alex. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, Alex, for being with us. My question is, how can we get the board more engaged in the grant process? Usually when we come to a meeting, we get a report. We're going to do these special events and this annual giving campaign, and our direct mail, if we're still doing direct mail, goes out these dates. We'll do a Giving Tuesday. And oh, by the way, if you happen to know a member of a board, please let us know. And then that may be the last thing we hear. How can we get the board and our directors more engaged in saying, I've got this asset over here called a board member. Let me see if I can get them to go with us or to help make presentations, or how can board members be more actively involved in a positive way when invited?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think step one for nonprofit staff is to share with board members what are the foundations that are being applied to, and see if the board members know anybody on those foundations. So I think that is step one.
And can I interrupt, Alex?
Yes, sir.
Not typically, but part of the time, foundations make who their board of members public. And that's another resource that staff can share with their board. And that, I guess that's matchmaking too.
Absolutely. It's usually in their 990s. Now their 990s are old. So there could be some turnover on the foundation's board from when the 990 is published, but for the most part, there's at least a significant amount of stability. And then, so that's step one. Another step, I think, is that if there are board members who are good at and interested in doing meetings with foundations, I think that adds a lot of oomph, for lack of a better term, to
how do you spell that? How do you spell that?
OOMPH. Oomph.
Gotcha.
Yes. To those meetings, because a board member can speak to what it is that they see as valuable about the nonprofit. They can speak to why they're involved with the nonprofit. They can speak to the board's commitment to a new initiative that maybe they're seeking funding for. So I think that those are all really great ways. And also, I think one of the most important ways for a board to be involved is to thank foundations for grants.
Hey, could you repeat that?
Yes, I think the most important way for a board member to be involved is to thank foundations for grants. Handwritten thank you
why I
notes
love that?
from
Because,
the board.
pardon me, I'm butting in, I won't do it again, but a lot of board members are reluctant to get involved in fundraising. And I think that's a great way for them to dip their foot in the pond and just express thanks to a foundation or a philanthropist or a corporation.
Yeah, a thank you goes a really long way. And you'd be surprised how many people don't say thank you. It's a devastating part of our society, I believe. But aside from that, I think that those are the best ways to be involved. It could be a thank you note. It could be a thank you call. It could be a thank you meeting. I don't care what it is. Somehow find a way for the board to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald, for being a member of our learning community. John, I saw Andrew had a question. Do we have some questions in the chat space?
We do. We've got a number of questions. The first one
we can do, and the deal is, if they're a piece of cake, I will answer them. If they're more challenging than a piece of cake, Texas Rangers fan extraordinaire Alex Dunn will answer it.
Okay, I'll get ready to hit a grand slam.
Yeah, this first question is in our Q&A, and it says, I'm trying to grow my skills and I'm new to the nonprofit and grant writing world. Can you please provide me with some resources that can help me write a successful grant proposal? What are some books that you recommend for writing foundational grants?
One of the first books that I read on writing foundation grants was called Storytelling for Grant Writers. And I thought that it was really great. It really influenced a lot of my approach. And so that's one that I would recommend. I can't think of who the author is off the top of my head. So that would be a really
We'll have
good
the
one.
audience Google it. Let's see. This is a learning community. And the
There
audience,
you go.
what was the name of it again?
I believe it's storytelling for grant writers.
Okay, audience, there's your challenge. Google it and put it in the chat space.
Another thing that I would recommend, and this is kind of a shameless plug, but is to join the Grant Professionals Association or something like that. I'm a president of the Grant Professionals Association of North Texas, so I think that we put out great educational programming personally, a little biased, but I think that that's a great way to get some professional development around grant writing.
John,
And
do we have some other questions in the queue?
We do. Kelly Sullivan is asking, how important are relationships with foundations to securing funding with them?
I'm so glad that somebody asked that question. Kelly gets a gold star. So you want a relationship with the foundation to the extent that the foundation wants a relationship with you, is what I would say. It's a little bit like the matchmaking, don't really date your funder thing that we were talking about earlier. But there are foundations who like to have a really deep relationship with their nonprofits, and there are foundations who want their privacy and don't want to have.
By the way, how are you going to discern that? Is it usually common sense? Did they make it clear on their website? How do you make a conclusion whether or not they welcome relationship building?
So the first indication is if they will take a meeting or a phone call or not.
Yeah.
If they won't take a meeting or a phone call, then you can be pretty assured that they want to maintain their privacy, and they'll let you know if they want to talk to you, kind of a thing. But otherwise, it's really important. It is an X factor that can increase your funding. And it's very important to have a relationship with them. And the most important factor of the relationship is what we were just talking about a second ago, is to remember to be thankful and have gratitude to the foundations.
And report on amazing results, right?
Yes.
All right. Before I read the next question, our learning community has come up with the name of the book.
Oh, see? I'm proud of them.
There are actually two. Margaret said Grant Writing as Storytelling by J.T. Chappell. And then Dr. Ed, I think it is called Storytelling Grant Seekers Creative Nonprofit Fundraising. And I don't see the author on there, but there he created a live link so that if you want to check that out, it's there as well. So
thanks,
there
y'all.
You ask.
Hey, remember the show? I don't know, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something, and you get to
phone
call a friend. That's what I was thinking. Hey, you had 3 innovations. I'm going to get to them now because I still have other questions, but these are 3, can I call them Alex Dunnisms? But number 1, could you take a few minutes to describe your area of focus strategy?
Yeah, so area of focus strategy is one of the workarounds, as you were saying earlier, Jim, as a way to make sure that you don't drive yourself crazy when you're doing grants. It's really hard to do 20 different grants for 20 different things. You burn yourself out. You might get funded for the one that was like the 20th priority for your organization. You might not get enough funding to do any of them. And so the area of focus strategy is essentially you pick what are the most fundable parts of your organization that you want to seek funding for. You build a budget that includes your overhead operating costs of those programs so that you kind of get a workaround on helping to keep the lights on. And you do things in a system way so that when you get the money on the back end, it's a lot easier for you to report on, to manage. It's not going to drive your accountant crazy. It's not going to drive you crazy. And so that's what the area of focus is.
Okay, how about taking a few minutes to describe your core cultivation strategy?
Okay, so this goes back to was it Kristen who got the gold star for asking about relationships? I'm sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, but the relationships, especially with foundations, is so important. And
If they will permit it.
one way that you can thread the needle is by having a cultivation strategy that is male based. So if
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
male, MAIL, not MAIL, male based.
Okay.
So if anyone has bought a house or sold a house in the last decade, you know what I'm talking about. You bought or sold a house, and now your realtor and the mortgage company and anyone else that you touched when you bought or sold your house is sending you something about how you can host Thanksgiving at your house and tips to host Thanksgiving at your house and on Thanksgiving. And so the core cultivation is a little bit like that, in that it's a strategy to send the funders things that they are going to be interested in that serve their benefit a few times per year. And what it does is it keeps you front of mind for them without you being like, it's about me, it's about me, it's about me. You're giving them information that they would find useful on their own. And so it keeps you front of mind. And what that does is it can turn a no from a funder into a yes. It can increase your grants year over year. It can, I've even had it where a funder came back and gave a second grant in the same cycle to the organization outside of their normal funding cycle. So it's a really powerful tool.
Okay, that's 2 innovations, and I believe there's a third we need to cover. How about take a few minutes to describe your attractiveness quotient survey?
Yeah, so one of the things that's a real heartbreaker as a grants professional is that there are things outside of the application that could decide whether a funder funds a grant or not. And it really broke my heart several times. And so I decided that we were going to develop something that would help determine or would help organizations to maximize how attractive they are to foundations, because foundations in particular, they're savvy people. They're not just looking at your application, they're looking at your financials, they're looking at your website, they're looking at your social media. And so I developed a 15 item assessment that I go through, and it gives suggestions for clients on how they can improve how attractive they're going to be to funders beyond the grant application.
By the way, Alex, at the close of this webinar, and we got 9 minutes left, we're doing fine, but we're going to show your contact information and your website. Are there some resource material, background material on these 3 innovations that are visible on your website?
Yes, absolutely. So I've got a very extensive blog if people want to learn more about writing grants. I have an attractiveness quotient survey that organizations can buy on my website if you would like to know how attractive your organization would be with funders. And like I said, a really extensive blog that has a lot of great information in it.
Okay, this is my why is there air question?
Oh, dear.
And I wanted to get it in before we finished up. But could you tell us what are the chief elements of a strongly crafted proposal?
Yeah, so a grant application has a few components that is in every application, generally speaking. There is an introduction, there's a statement of need, there's a project description, there's a metrics, outcomes, evaluation section, there's sustainability, and there's a conclusion. And then you've got all of the attachments that go with it.
I'll tell you what, will you mind repeating that? That is really good stuff.
Absolutely. So in most grants, there are the same sections. You've got the introduction,
Mhm.
the need statement, the program statement, which is where you describe your program, metrics and evaluation, which is how you're going to know if you're successful or not, sustainability, and the conclusion. And so the most important parts about that, generally speaking, is that it's all readable. It's not a statistic textbook. So there's good data in it, but it's not so much data that somebody feels like they're reading something that's in an academic journal or something. It's compelling. The biggest thing I say is when you finish reading it, do you want to write a check yourself?
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that.
You know, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to move another human being who
Yeah.
is reading this into saying that this is worthy of being funded. In general, when I work with clients, especially if I work with clients who have done grants before, the areas that I find that need to be kind of punched up the most are the introduction, because the reader might not read past the introduction. They might read that couple of paragraphs and decide if it goes in the yes or the no pile.
Sounds like it's writing a book. You better have a good opening chapter.
Yes, that opening chapter is all of it. If it's a slow burn in the opening chapter, I'm setting it down and getting another one. The statement of need, it can often be punched up with really good data that explains why this social issue is the most important social issue they're going to read about today. Metrics that convey impact, that tie back to the statement of need. So it's all about the impact that the organization is making. And then making sure that the organization is really highlighting their unique selling points and what it is that sets them apart. Are usually the areas that need the most punching up.
Most grant applications have something called deadlines, don't they?
Yeah,
Can you tell us, I've seen it from many different perspectives. Who should be involved in approving the grant application?
That really depends, I think, on the organization and what level of grant it is. So always, there's two people who should be involved, I believe. One is the person who's responsible for overseeing the program, so like the program director. The other is the finance person to look at the budget and make sure that the budget is right and that it includes all of the costs. And then depending on the organization and what the application is for, maybe the executive director, maybe a program manager, you're trying to thread the needle between having enough buy-in that when you get the grant, it'll be successful, and not having too many cooks in the kitchen where the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. And the other is expediting the process itself. I mean, my perspective is the grant writer usually develops 80% of the final product. And then the rest of the people, the lawyers, the accountants, God bless them, you know, the big bosses, and I've been one of them, but I was a good one. They take, you know, they do 20% of the lifting, but take almost like 80% of the time, you know, so it's again, you called it threading the needle.
Yeah, you know, it's a balance, like all good things in life, right?
Yeah. Well, we got a few minutes left. Let's go back. Do you think a good journalism or PR writer can become a good grant writer?
You know, let me start by saying I could not be a journalist or a good PR writer.
Why?
I think that there are specialized skills. I think journalism is a specialized skill. I think PR writing is a specialized skill. And I think grant writing are a specialized skill. And I think that if I wanted to be a journalist or a PR writer, I would need training in order to do that well and at a
How
high
about
level.
flipping it then? How about taking those PR and journalism? Can they be trained to become good grant writers?
They can be trained to become a good grant writer. I know many that have. I think that they were trained to do that transition. I don't think it's like a drop them in and it's instantly perfect. I think grant writing is a specialized skill, and that it requires specialized training.
Yeah. Hey, wanted to get this last question. What place do you see for artificial intelligence in grant writing?
You know, I spent a lot of time trying to make AI work in grant writing this year. And what I came to is that AI doesn't work in grant writing yet. I think that AI is really good in short bursts. It can write a really good email, a really good one-page letter, but after about 3 paragraphs, it starts repeating itself. And the data that AI pulls in isn't reliable. I think that it can be used for outlining and for different things like that, but I don't think it's yet at the level where AI could be used to write grants. Believe me, I tried this year.
Hey, listen, John, can you put Alex's contact information on the screen? Alex, you've been a magnificent resource. The hour has just flown by. And again, I better tell you, when you do such a good job, we're going to ask you back in 2024. And I want to have you before you become the billionaire grant lady. But it's been a wonderful dialogue. You've really enriched our learning community. And thank you not only for the services you provide for so many nonprofits, but for the leadership that you provide the grant writing and foundation relations profession. And it's just been a wonderful joy to get better acquainted through this process. And we are going to do it again.
Yeah.
By the way, what we're going to do, we're going to share a brief summary. It's 1,300 character spaces because that's the LinkedIn limit of Alex's 5 main points. That will be posted in about 60 seconds on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then John does a spin dry. And John, I think about tomorrow morning around 10 a.m., we will be posting the recording, which is important, Alex, because more people watch the recording than watch us live. But you've been a wonderful learning partner. Thank you so much. Give me a fist bump before we go. And again, I've really enjoyed that you reached up the phone and said, let's get acquainted. And we put this together and we're going to do it again. Okay.
I've loved it. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex Dunn. Thank you to our learning community. And we'll see you in 2 weeks on November 8th. And everyone, to our learning community, thank you for everything you do in your nonprofits to improve the quality of life in the community, in the state, the nation, and the world. We really value your service, and be well. Good night, Alex.
Thank you all. Bye.